What is up, folks? Welcome to the newest episode of the Harold McBasketball Show. I'm your gracious host, as always, back better than ever, Harold McBasketball. My star co-host as well, I know Ball Paul. How are you, man?
I'm feeling good, Harry. This is our official 10th episode. Technically, it's the
Huge,
11th.
huge.
Huge. It's technically the 11th, but we did like a half episode for the Kristaps trade reaction. So this is the 10th episode special. And it's also our 20 subscriber special. We have 20 subscribers, I
Clap
believe.
it up, clap it up.
And we are thankful for each and every one of our subscribers. So I'm feeling great, to sum it up, Harry.
Yeah, me too, me too. Stoked. Even though it wasn't on the last episode, I could tell that the audience was still as devoted as ever to tuning into the podcast, one of our most viewed episodes ever. So thank you all for staying dedicated, even when I could not. And also shout out to Sean for really carrying on that episode. He did awesome. You as well, Paul. You two both killed it. So love seeing the pod expand like that and continue to do well, even when he is sub out for an episode.
Yeah, Sean is an honorary part of the McBasketball Show family, and he powered through COVID to do that episode, and it is the most viewed episode on the channel. But
Yeah,
that'll get surpassed by this one right here, I'm sure of it.
yeah, of course, of course. Rest up, Sean. Work on your immune system a little bit. Like we can't have you getting COVID every month, but thank
He's,
you for stepping up.
he powers through it. Anyway, though, what will we be discussing on this episode, on the return episode, the comeback episode for Harold?
Yeah, return episode. So we're going to dive into some headlines. I feel like the James Harden has been a big saga that we've alluded to in a couple of episodes, but we've kind of refrained from our deep dive. But it feels like we're getting to the point where we can no longer refrain. For a little while, I'd kind of been assuming that this was all just fluff and drama, but ultimately both sides were going to realize that they're at their best with each other and that things would resolve themselves. Doesn't really feel like that's going to be the case anymore. It's getting a lot tougher to figure out how the situation is going to go. So I think that's really worth diving into. And then I think that will kind of naturally segue into talking about the Clippers, because obviously that's the team that's been rumored to be most interested in Harden. So we'll also talk a little bit about them and if we think it's worth it for them to pursue Harden, if they should pursue other things, if the team should even remain constructed the way it is. So I think both teams have a lot of big question marks that we can dive into here.
Yeah, some big question marks for both of those franchises. For sure, a bit of disarray, and we're going to try to dive into it as best we can. And the reason we're discussing Harden is because Monday a video surfaced of Harden in China. He's just in
Yes.
China doing like a camp, dissing Daryl Morey. It's like a horrible quality video too.
Yeah, and it's like a camp of it's all like 12-year-olds there. And he's just ranting at them.
He calls Daryl Morey a liar. Um, yeah, calls Daryl Morey a liar, and that was a few days after there was like reports that they're not going to look to trade him, which also kind of
Yeah, and the full quote was wild. The full quote I have in front of me. It's Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of. Even though he spent like half of his year or half of his career essentially playing for Daryl Morey organizations. And he did choose to opt into his contract also, which is like part of this head scratching story. It's like so badly he doesn't want to play for the Sixers, but he opted into his contract for one more year. So it's interesting. It's a super weird story.
yeah. And so I'm going to go through the Harden timeline real quick because this is not the first time this man has requested a trade. He has an interesting kind of past that's tangled with Mr. Daryl Morey because he was the former GM of the Rockets. And so, so born August 26th in Los Angeles, California.
We're going way back.
I'll skip ahead
here. Okay.
Gets drafted to the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Big jump.
A few years there, wins Sixth Man of the Year. Then he's traded to the Rockets in 2012, and that's where he becomes, the superstar James Harden that we know and love. He was like the scoring leader for 3 years straight. Took them to the Western Conference Finals against the Warriors in a very iconic series. Chris Paul gets like he hurts his leg in Game 5. They're up 3-2.
Yeah, they pretty much won that title. That's like an asterisk. Like they won the title that year. That's what all the Houston fans still believe to this day.
Yeah, yeah, because if Chris Paul hadn't got hurt, they were definitely going to go to the finals. But he did get hurt, and in Game 6, they iconically missed 27 straight threes
Legendary.
in a massive blowout, and then
Yeah,
they
kind of,
lost Game
yeah,
7.
I know. Yeah, and that was kind of like a little bit like the nail in the coffin of the Daryl Morey only shoot threes um philosophy. Like don't play power forwards, don't play centers. Like PJ Tucker just plays center. Everyone just shoots threes on the team. Very fun idea. Still a fan. I think the statistics still agree with the move, but yeah, I think that was kind of the nail in the coffin for that team.
I I used to really like those Rockets days, and I was a
They
pretty
were
big
very cool. They were cutting edge. They felt like the new it was very Moneyball. They're kind of like they felt like a new gen of basketball, kind of like what the Warriors had been bringing in with their just like 3 point happy teams.
yeah, and Harden with that step back, it seems like that was a move we hadn't really seen being
Yeah, but
utilized.
now everyone does it.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm not going to say he invented foul baiting or kind of flopping, but the way in
I kind of think he did.
yeah, the head back, the
Yeah,
drawn fouls, nothing we had seen nothing like it before. This man had like a 40% usage, like the second highest ever behind Westbrook, I think in the 2019-20 season. So what a time to be alive. And jokes aside, like if Chris Paul didn't get hurt, who knows? That Warriors team was the Durant Warriors, like super team. I think there's a very good chance they would have still lost. But like the fact that they took them to 7 and they were up 3-2 in that series with that roster, incredible. And Harden is objectively an incredible player and talent, and like those highlights go crazy.
yeah, he was definitely at his peak. Playing for Houston.
So then let's see. There's a thing where they end up trading Chris Paul for Westbrook, very iconic trade as well.
Yeah, yeah, one of
American.
several head scratching Westbrook trades that happened throughout the league. Um, yeah, probably the start of the downfall though for the Rockets.
And I imagine that was maybe a bit of Harden's
Yeah, I believe it very much was. It was like Harden and Chris Paul weren't getting along anymore. James still really liked Westbrook from their time together on the Thunder. They're still good friends. It was just like they kind of just realized it didn't work with the two of them playing together in Houston. But yeah, it was definitely some major James Harden influence in that trade, where I believe they also gave up 2 first round picks to get Westbrook. But then they found out pretty quickly that Chris Paul was probably the more valuable asset in that deal, and that the 2 first round picks were definitely not necessary to include.
yeah, not a great look. And like you said, it was pretty apparent pretty quickly that that duo was not going to work out. But I think they did remain friends. Harden kind of, I believe, gave Westbrook a bit of a heads up and is like, I'm probably gonna get traded, get out of here, and so Westbrook, I think, also gets traded or requests a trade, maybe for John Wall, if I maybe.
Yeah, essentially, it's more of just like I think it was more sort of just like a kind of like a salary dumping move, like move Westbrook to get Wall on an expiring, and then you'll kind of like restart the rebuild.
But that's in 2020, I believe, or he gets traded to the Nets in 2021. Then there's that whole saga, of course, 2021. COVID, Kyrie
Yeah,
drama.
yeah, season kind of falls apart as Kyrie's not playing most of the games because of COVID. Vibes are not great in the locker room. Team was like really good in the playoffs before that when all three were healthy. Like the team looked phenomenal when everybody was playing.
Yeah,
But unfortunately, like the personalities just like couldn't mesh. I think Kyrie made it difficult. I think James has also proven himself to be a difficult personality to work with. So although he tries to make it seem like he was absolved of any wrongdoing in that, I think he also needs to take part of the blame for that team falling apart. But yeah, pretty much he just like forced his way out of there in the Ben Simmons trade, and then
Exactly,
ends up in Philadelphia.
and that kind of takes us to him calling Daryl Morey a liar in front of children in China, filmed on a camcorder. So
Yeah, yeah, and I don't think anyone like really knows what happened, but pretty much like James Harden took a pay cut last season so that they could just bring on a couple extra guys, make the team a little bit deeper. Goes into the last year of his contract now, opts in, he's making 35 million. I think his expectation was that Morey was then going to extend him on a max contract. I assume there was some kind of like behind the scenes handshake agreement that they went into that he would get that. Um, but then I think going to this year, I think his decline was a little bit evident last season. He's still amazing, but it's probably a step or two behind where he once was in Houston.
yeah,
So I just don't think Morey was willing to give him a big max contract. So with that pissed off Harden, and now we're at this big stalemate.
and yeah, that seems to be the moment whatever happened behind the scenes that soured that relationship between Daryl Morey and James Harden. Like you said, he took I think a $14 million pay cut because he's a selfless soul. They got
Absolutely, absolutely. Teammate of the year,
incredible
James Harden.
incredible players in return due to his selfless acts, such as PJ Tucker and Daniel House. That's what people were like, wow, they really deepened and solidified this roster. But
Oh yeah, and like Tucker was like a good addition, but yeah, no, spending any money on Daniel House was just immediately just like this is not going to be a game changing move for this team by any means.
and so yeah, that's the present. He didn't get that huge extension. Then he opts into his final year of the contract. Um, and then maybe worth mentioning, Zach Lowe talked about how there's like this crazy CBA clause if you're in the
Yes.
contract that if you like don't play or don't show up, you're like banned from playing any type of professional basketball.
Yeah, it's essentially up to the Sixers. So like they can null and void his contract if he doesn't want to play, and they don't have to pay him the money. But also somehow because this worked into the CBA, essentially he can't then go and play for another team if the Sixers null and void his contract, unless the Sixers were like, yeah, we're okay with him playing for another team, which they would never do. They would never do that. They want to win. They're not going to give another team James Harden for free.
Which is insane because it's any professional team. And that does not mean just the NBA. That means if he wants to go play in China, where he called Maury a liar, the Sixers can somehow just say no. Sorry, man.
That's insane. I did not realize it extended as far as not allowing them to play overseas. That's
And
that's such a weird wrinkle in the CBA, and it seems like something they would have enacted recently with all these superstars demanding trades, but apparently it's just like been in the fine print for ages now. So
yeah,
might be subject of discussion in the next CBA agreement, but you know the new CBA is done, so like it's gonna be a while until they can even like renegotiate that the players and the overlords of the league.
but all to say, it puts Harden in a bit of a precarious situation, I suppose, and that he definitely has to show up to some level to Sixers training camp, and so yeah, that's present day. So now I think we can kind of speculate on how this will play out. Maybe what we see happening, the potential of this team if it stays as it is. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, what do you think, Harry? Do you think this team has any hope of coming together and overcoming their
It's
differences?
it's a tough thing. It's like I've still always thought that best case scenario is they kind of come together and say like James Harden and Morey, they're like we don't like each other anymore, even though they've worked together for so long, but they just decide to tough it out for one more year, and then James Harden's a free agent, he can walk, and in that situation like James Harden will still get his money for the season, he'll still play, and like the Sixers will still be good, which is ultimately what Daryl Morey wants. He's also said it publicly now that like he doesn't envision a future with Harden on this team anyway. So I think it's still in their best interest to tough it out for one more year. But I think this team can still be good without Harden. So if that's the route they want to They want to go. I think it's not a bad idea to tough it out for one more year. Let him walk. Give Maxi essentially the money that Harden opens up for the cap, and then just run like a Maxi and Embiid duo, which I think would still be a really strong team.
Yeah, I love Maxi. I think he has huge potential. Obviously, now they're under Nick Nurse, Doc
Yep,
Rivers.
yep. New coach Nick Nurse is in.
Yep, Nick.
Defensive mindset anyway. So even before the drama started, I always thought that Nick Nurse and Harden was going to be kind of a. I couldn't really see a world where they work together well because I think Nick Nurse is all about like versatile defense and effort on that end of the floor, and Harden just gives you neither. Because like not only is he like incapable of guarding anyone other than a point guard, but he's probably not even capable of that. He just doesn't really play defense. So that didn't really feel like a good match anyway.
Yeah. That being said, I think Doc Rivers from I don't know the guy. I don't really know too much about what goes on in the locker room, but I know what he sounds like, and it's annoying.
That
And
is true.
he
He
seems
will
like a
now be broadcasting the finals, which is terrible. Gonna be listening to the finals on mute now.
yeah. No, I'm not putting the volume up on my TV.
Tune into our live stream for the finals. We will announce the finals on YouTube Live, maybe if we feel like it.
It's like him, Doris Burke, and what?
Yeah, we still have Mike Breen. Luckily, he's amazing. So he's kind of like the last of the legendary trio.
And Gundy's gone though. I think
Yeah,
Mark Jackson, I think, is gone too.
yeah, yeah. Which like Mark Jackson, good analyst, but I'm not super upset seeing him go. I actually liked Van Gundy. I thought Van Gundy was good, but he did probably complain a little bit too much. But I thought he was still a good analyst, and I'd rather have Van Gundy than fucking Doc Rivers.
Yeah, no, I think the grass is not always greener, as they say. And yeah, I kind of liked his complaining sometimes. Sometimes it was a bit too much, and
Yeah, but sometimes you need it because sometimes the refs are just like officiating a bad game, and all the fans are just like dying for the announcers to actually acknowledge that the officiating is not great that game. And like Van Gundy was the only person actually willing to call it out. So I always like that.
I just thought him and Mark were too much like kind of former coaches, always kind of having to say how they would do things and how they would.
Right.
That was the annoying part. But
Yeah.
Doc Rivers is going to be very annoying and hard to listen to with that very scratchy voice. But what I was saying is that he seems like an abrasive personality, kind of the classic coaching style of not exactly. Uh,
Yeah, he coaches his guys hard. He's not very warm and fuzzy.
yeah, I feel like there's a word I'm looking for, but it's like a coaching style where it's like the opposite of Brad Stevens in a way where it's not subtle. He's going to yell at them. He's going to probably make them run laps in practice.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Nick Nurse runs that locker room. I think either he kind of gets trampled over by the bigger personalities and it's even more chaotic than it was with Doc Rivers, or maybe he kind of his more soft-spoken approach will prove beneficial and he'll kind of find a way to have a good relationship with James Harden and I don't know, a new coach could definitely change things. And I like him as a coach. I mean, he's won a championship.
Yeah. No, I think Nurse is a good coach. And I think it's a good move for that team to move away from kind of this like personality players coach to more of an X and O's guy who's he's not gonna be like super confrontational with the guys. He's gonna be like, this is how we're gonna do it. This is how we're gonna run our defense. This is how we're gonna run our offense. That's all gonna go through Embiid. He's gonna be the anchor on offense and defense, and that's how we're gonna do it. And I think he's gonna structure like a really good team. So I think they'll still be good. I think if they decide to run it back, they'll still be like a top 4, 5 seed. Kind of like what we mentioned before, but the actual odds of that happening is feeling lower and lower each week. And I think what would be interesting to talk about is like how does this team look and how are they gonna fall in the standings if they essentially have Harden not play this year but still eat up a sizable portion of their cap. Um, I think that would hurt them big time. I think they'd be pretty bad.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. So
it's kind of like the Ben Simmons issue. So like if he doesn't play and they've just got like just like a huge chunk of their cap sunk to him, basically, it's like you're probably looking at a team that's all of a sudden play in range.
But Harden's gonna play, right? It's just about how hard and how invested
Yeah,
the team.
yeah, and I think something that could be interesting to talk about. Maybe that's kind of where we segue to trade discussions. Is I think that's totally at play, and I think what Moore is essentially trying to do is exactly what he did with Ben Simmons. He's like, we're not going to be in a rush to trade you, but we're going to wait till the season starts, wait till teams get desperate, wait till injuries happen, and that's when you're going to be able to get the most for James Harden. So I think that's probably what we'll see, and I think there are a couple of teams that I envision potentially having underwhelming seasons that would then try to make a play for James Harden.
Yeah, it does feel like Daryl Morey closing the door on trades is kind of a sort of strategic play there, and like the Simmons,
Yeah,
that was like a trade deadline move that ended up being like in a way great for the Sixers. Obviously, looking at it now, it's not a great situation, but they got rid of Simmons as the Nets got desperate with their situation now.
yeah, and it was still a good move. They still had they get like 2 seasons out of Harden essentially. Like both were competitive, both were good. Ideally, they would have gotten a little bit more out of him, but I think that's still a solid turnaround for Ben Simmons, who wasn't playing for them and is essentially still not playing for Brooklyn. So definitely was an upgrade. And like as far as like shutting down any potential trades, I think it's just because he doesn't like what he's seeing right now, and he's like, we're just not going to make a trade during the offseason. Yeah, I think really the only real offer they have on the table is from the Clippers, and it's not much. Like I think the offer is essentially um Norman Powell and then like whatever else they can scrap together. But like Norman Powell will be like the centerpiece of the trade. And I think as of now, like they're even holding out on including Terrence Mann in the deal, who is like, a solid young player. Nothing crazy, but like definitely a player the Sixers would want in that trade. And I think as of now, the Clippers are like, no, we're not even including him, which kind of makes sense because Harden's on and expiring. He's not really playing for anyone. Like he's kind of hard to deal with. So the market's just not great right now.
Yeah, no, I'm curious to hear your your trade ideas and which teams might by the deadline be in a situation where they would turn their head and consider Harden.
Yeah. Here, I'll give you my favorite. I think this one makes a ton of sense for both teams. And I think this team has a couple of options on how they do it, but I think the Bulls could find themselves in the market for James Harden by the deadline. Their team has always underperformed. They've got some good players, but it feels like none of them are quite superstar enough to actually get them over the hump. But the plus with them is that one, they would play for the 76ers. That's huge. And they're still all-star caliber players on long-term deals. So I could see it either being like Zach LaVine for Harden or DeMar DeRozan for Harden. And I think in both those moves, the Sixers get better. They just add more depth around Embiid. They have more go-to guys down the stretch, more capable scorers. And then a team like the Bulls, they get like a true point guard, someone who can facilitate, someone who can help their three-point shooting, which is abysmal. Someone can help their free throw shooting, which is also terrible. I think it's a solid win-win, and I think both teams would get better if they make that move.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I could definitely see that happening because there's no world in which I see the where'd you go? Oh.
I'm here. I'm here. I was plugging in my laptop.
There's no world in which the Bulls are going to be a good team with their current roster as it stands.
Yeah, they need a move so bad, and this could be one for them.
I think Levine must have a few more years on his contract. They gave him the supermax, maybe. Vucevic, I know they extended, and DeMar might be the one expiring.
Yeah, Zach's not on a super max, but he's definitely on a fairly big deal right now.
Or
It
just on
wasn't
this.
it was max contract, standard max contract, yeah. And he signed that I think in was it 2021? So I think he still has like 2 or 3 years left on that deal. I think DeMar just signed an extension too, so he has like 2 or 3 years left on the deal. So I think either are good. You just get like an all-star caliber guy to play next to Embiid, who you know is gonna play. Like at this point, if you're the Sixers, it feels like you're so close to being a good team. Like you got like Maxey, who's this really talented young point guard, shooting guard player. Embiid is obviously the focal point of that team on the offensive side and the defensive side. It feels like you just need like one more really good player who's going to play. So I think you could get that from the Bulls, even if they're not quite as good as Harden.
Yeah. No, and I think Levine would make a lot of sense, and I could see the mindsets come trade deadline where the Bulls are like, okay, let's just get him off the books. We're paying him like 40 something million. Uh,
Hmm.
and then if we get Harden in here, maybe we have a chance to make a decent playoff run while he's still happy to be with us.
Yeah.
We can get him off the books. And then obviously for the Sixers, it's pretty easy to convince yourself to sign someone like Zach Levine. So yeah, A plus.
Yeah, and if the Bulls had to, if they got really desperate, which I feel like they could, because the franchise is kind of poorly managed. I think the Sixers could even try to get more. They could try to get the Bulls to throw in like one of their, decent young guys. Maybe they could get them throwing like Kobe White or something to come off the bench. Like he's actually like a solid point guard. They just extended. Um, and the Bulls also have, I'm blanking on his name, but who is the power forward on their team? He's a young guy.
Patrick
They
Williams.
drafted him. Yeah, Patrick Holmes. They drafted him fifth overall a couple of years ago. Feel like everyone's still waiting for him to like show some signs of being a competent NBA player, but he's got all the tools, so like it might happen at some point. Like that'd be a nice throw in for that deal if the Sixers can make that happen.
Yeah. I'm going to look up his age, but he's like 22, 23.
Yeah, no, he's like young enough to where he'd be like an older player getting drafted now.
Zach Lowe holding off hard on his. He's 21. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, yeah, and like the shot looks good. He's big. He seems like he'd be a good defender. This is kind of a side tangent now because I don't think the Bulls would let him go in this kind of deal. I think it'd be a one for one swap. But yeah, people are still holding out big time on him. It's like I'm not totally out on him, but haven't seen a ton. All right, anyway, let's move on. Let me see some of my other ones. That was kind of like the best one I had circled. Everything else is kind of like, I just like the Bulls deal better if they're willing to do it. Something else I thought would be interesting though, like maybe like the Lakers try to make that move to get like a big three of LeBron, Harden, Anthony Davis, and they kind of have the money to do it because they're bringing back D'Lo, who was okay for them last year, but definitely had his flaws, and they have a couple other players they could throw in to try to make the contracts work. So like if they're willing to do like D'Lo and Austin Reeves, I don't think they'd be willing to do that, but if they're willing to consider that for Harden, I think that's like a good deal for both sides. I think it's a better deal for the Sixers though.
Yeah, it would. We'd have to see where the Lakers are by the trade deadline, but um, yeah, Austin Reeves. I don't think they would be willing to let go of him. But D'Lo is making a sizable salary, so
Yeah, yeah, and if they could find someone else to sub in for Reeves, if they were like, we can't trade Reeves, like I'm sure they could cobble together some other contracts just to get up to Harden's money and have D'Lo essentially be the focal point of the deal. Because then in that case, it's like the Sixers just get D'Lo, who's a good player. They can start him next to Maxey, and then if you're the Lakers and you feel like you really need to make a push this year and you're not quite there, I think Harden still is an upgrade over D'Lo, and I think that could make sense.
hmm, yeah. As compared to the Bulls, I think I like it a bit less, and I don't see it happening as much, but still a solid idea.
Yeah, these are big time dart throws. All right, other dart throw. Also would not do this trade, but like maybe the Knicks try to land Harden. They do something like Barrett, Josh Hart for Harden. If they just feel like their team can't get over the hump, they don't have the superstar power to do it. Maybe they make a move for Harden. I don't think they would. I think they'd rather stay on the younger side right now. Um, but maybe they could even do it without trading their young guys. Like maybe it's just like Julius Randle for James Harden straight up. Like maybe there's a deal there.
Yeah. Shit, I would maybe take that right now.
Right, right. Like that kind of makes sense for both sides. It's like if you're the Sixers, you get someone who's going to play. I think Randall will be a pretty good fit next to Embiid at the power forward spot. And then, if you're the Knicks, you get James Harden to play with Brunson. They can definitely play together because Brunson, although is a little small, he definitely plays hard on the defensive end. And he's super versatile. He played really well off Luka, so he's definitely capable of playing off of a ball dominant player. So I think there could be something there if the Knicks were to get a little bit desperate.
What's crazy just talking about all of this is how good of a fit Harden and Embiid like already are together.
That's what sucks. Like the team is already so good right now. Like I don't really know why they have to. I mean, like obviously if they blow it up because Harden's just like not happy with his contract situation and just can't be happy anywhere right now it seems. But Like when they made that trade, it made so much sense on paper, just having this like awesome facilitator, shooter, shot creator to run pick and roll with Joel Embiid. And it like legitimately was amazing. And they several like incredible games against the Celtics where it felt like the Celtics, you know, were in trouble. So, like the team is legit and like as currently constructed feels like it could be a team that could make a championship run. So it's a shame that's kind of falling apart like this, but it does feel like it's getting past the point of no return to where they can't really keep running this back. But it's just a personality issue.
Yeah. No, that pick and roll is incredible because of how of his ability to either pop out or Embiid can drive. Harden, just the incredible timing on um, whether the big steps up to then pass it off, alley oop it, or he can do anything in that pick and roll. And Embiid is the perfect dance partner. Harden, his usage was down to like 25%. Still felt like he was handling the ball a ton, but it felt like there was finally a good balance where he wasn't just doing ISOs every play and then kicking out to shooters. There was some versatility in that game. So yeah, it sucks. It sucks that especially that it's between him and like their general manager. Like,
Right. It's not like the personalities on the floor don't get along together. Like the on the court product is incredible.
yeah, maybe not incredible, but
It's good though, and it makes a lot of sense on paper. And they seem to like each other. Like it seems like James and Embiid got along well together. Um, yeah, no, it's weird that's like a front office issue.
yeah. And like the rest of the team, I've always felt could be more involved. Like I always felt bad for Maxi, and maybe it's because he was on my fantasy team, but it felt like he was very underutilized. And like unless Harden was not on the floor, he was just like an off ball, like get to the corner.
Yeah, and I think that's also why it feels like the Sixers moving on from Harden is not the worst thing ever, as long as they can get somebody back. Because Maxi's more than capable of taking on a larger role and essentially like taking on the duties that Harden had. And not only that, but like he's young, he's gonna be around for a while, so it makes a lot of sense to build around him and Embiid. Because even if you keep Harden, like he's getting older, and you probably only have a couple of years of him anyway. So right now it's probably a fine time to just like focus on Maxi and Embiid, and then just like see what you can get around them to make the team as competitive as possible.
For sure, yeah. And Maxi averaging 20 points per game as kind of that quiet third option, I think shows how good a
Totally. Yeah,
player.
that's a lot of points for like the third option. Like I feel like usually like the third option is more like a 17, 18 points. So like 20 on incredible efficiency too. Like he's one of the best 3-point shooters in the league. Like if you make him the secondary scorer next to Embiid, I think he's easily up to 25 plus points per game, and all of a sudden you're not missing Harden as much.
One of the best finishers too.
Yeah. Yeah, he's very ready to be like the second best player on that team, which is why I feel okay like swapping Harden out for somebody who then would become the third option.
Yeah. We're running out of time. Part two of this real quick, and I want to talk about just what we could see this team being without Harden, and their potential with that. And also I kind of want to talk about the like is Harden a generational um what's the word? Like he always fucks up in big moments, a
Joker.
joker. I don't know why I couldn't think of that word.
Yeah, the
Of the
classic.
Harden.
We'll see. I'll take the other side next. I'm a Harden supporter in the clutch, but whatever. All right, let's part two it though.
We are back. So
All right,
go ahead, Harry.
I would say back for part two. There's one more spicy trade I want to talk about, um, and then you can make your case for Harden being this all-time choker, which I will refute a little bit. Um, the final trade I thought was is only the spiciest, definitely the least likely to happen. But I thought a team that would be an interesting fit would be if the Bucks decided they wanted to go another direction, if they thought like Drew Holiday and Middleton were potentially getting like too old, too injury prone, to where they maybe want to like make a splash, make an upgrade, and move one of them for Harden. And weirdly, I think the fit for that would be like pretty good. You'd kind of get a similar offense that the Sixers have right now with Embiid and Harden, but it'd be Harden and Giannis. And I think you could make the argument that the Bucks could be better with Harden running the point, and trading him for Middleton or something like that. And like the Sixers get like a really good shooter in Middleton, very good third option, nothing crazy. I thought that was spicy and fun.
I really, yeah, that is actually very spicy and fun. And that's behind the Bulls idea. I think that's actually because what could they trade Drew Holiday straight up?
pretty much. And like, and Holiday was like really bad in the playoffs. He's like, I like Holiday, good defender, but he just like loves his like 5 for 21 shooting nights. And I feel like they've just been happening more and more, and I can't really stand it. And like, and then you get Drew Holiday back on the Sixers. Pretty much the original guy they traded to start the process, and it all comes full circle.
That would be a beautiful full circle moment. And I just kind of envision it. Um, maybe Harden being a bit spiteful, wanting to go to another contender like that,
Hmm.
deciding
And
to
I think, yeah,
buddy
and
buddy
I
with
think,
a superstar.
yeah, and I think they'd have a good chance of re-signing him too. I guess that'd be like the big issue for the Bucks is they'd be like losing someone at Holiday who they're pretty much guaranteed to be able to keep around as long as they want. He's super loyal. Franchise loves him. He loves the franchise, and you'd be trading him for Harden, who's like a little bit of a disaster class. But I don't know if you kind of like get Harden's promise that he'd be willing to sign an extension, which I know doesn't really mean shit from him. But if you get that, like I know it doesn't really make a ton of sense when you start like really getting into the personalities of it. But I think on paper, I think if you add Harden to the Bucks, like they probably do get better.
Yeah, there's kind of a cycle with Harden where he kind of has a honeymoon phase with his new team. He's buddy
Oh
buddy.
yeah, and
So
it's so good when it's good. Like when the Nets were good, they were so good. When the Rockets were good, they were incredible. When the Sixers were good, they were also phenomenal. But then it just like deteriorates so quickly. So it's like, all right, how much time do you actually have with Harden being happy before he tries to force his way out and get fat?
it's literally like the cycle of abuse.
A little bit, yeah, yeah. No, he is absolutely the abusive boyfriend.
But then he just dips. He doesn't continue the cycle. Well, he starts it with another lover, if
Oh
you.
yeah, yeah. It's on to the next. It's on to the next. He makes someone else's life hell.
But yeah, no, that's an interesting idea, and I guess it's just the Bucks would probably be the ones to at the trade deadline. Have they seen enough signs that they feel like the upgrade is worth it? Because I imagine Chris Middleton's going to be healthier. Drew Holiday, maybe we'll see some level of decline, but will it be enough for them to be like, oh shit, we should change our approach here and not run it back with this core?
Yeah, and the only other thing with the Bucks, which I think is kind of like if I was the GM, like the big reason I wouldn't do this is because it's like you still like Giannis is still so young that I'm not really trying to flip one of my older stars for another old star. Because then the timeline is still really short. I'd be more willing to like lengthen my timeline and take a worse player. Like I'd rather get younger than get better almost if I'm the Bucks.
Right. And there might be, yeah, so they might want to explore other deals with Drew Holiday that involves getting young pieces back, is what you're saying?
Yeah, but also like that said, like easier said than done. And like honestly, the market for aging stars is not super high right now. So like odds are you're probably not getting anything too spectacular. But there are teams you can rope in. Like you can make the same Lakers trade for them, be like D'Lo for Holiday. Like I don't know, maybe.
I like D'Lo. I've always been a D'Lo guy, but
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, that was my last take.
I,
Spicy one. We'll see if anything happens at the deadline. If any of these happen, I will definitely give myself a big pat on the back.
yeah, I like. I'll speak it into existence that I think the Zach Levine one could be really interesting, and
It's literally perfect. That one is like literally perfect
I think it's
because both
perfect.
because both franchises are so desperate. And that's kind of what you need for a Harden trade. It's like you need a team to become as desperate as the Sixers are to get rid of Harden.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see if that happens. A big pat on the back for you, Mr. Harry.
Thank you, thank you. We'll see. All right. What do you want to talk about?
Um, well, I guess yeah, Harden being a big choker, and this is something that Lowe has been a big proponent of, and he kind of always says Harden disappears in the big moments. And it was funny because when the Celtics obviously played them in the semifinals, we had kind of some funny exchanges where you're like, "Oh, look, it's bullshit." He had the game winner.
I
Two
think he
very
had two game winners. He had two game winners. He was kind of electric. He did disappear a little bit, but when he was big time, he was big time.
absolutely, yeah. And I even was like, okay, yeah, that's notable. That's and again, like this guy has been in the conference finals plenty of times, right?
Hmm.
I don't have the stats in front of me, but I think overall he's performed fairly well. He's a superstar, and it's just kind of those back against the wall games that Lowe says he kind of tends to have worse shooting nights. But ultimately he did disappear kind of in game 6 and 7 against the Celtics. Embiid also was nowhere to be found,
Hmm.
and it kind of left us with the I don't know how valid the choking narrative really is because of the game winners versus kind of disappearing at the end. But
Yeah, I feel like because and I feel like it's always easy to twist it, but like Lowe was going all in. Lowe was like Harden's only good games come when the series is over. He's like Harden has to be down like 3-1 and the series is over for Harden to have a good game. And then against the Celtics, he like had two 40 bombs, both that came with game winners. And I was like, this guy can show up. And I feel like choking is always blown out of proportion for everybody. Like I think there are definitely some players that, I think the clutch gene is definitely evident in some players. And like other guys, not so much. But I think it's always I don't know, I think it's always like too much of a big talking point when you take a superstar and you're like, oh, they're chokers, like they can't do anything in the playoffs. It's like these guys are superstars, they're professionals, they can do it. They all have their off nights, but when you're as good as James Harden is, you're very capable of going off in big moments as well. And I think he kind of proved that in the Celtics series, although he did, kind of tail off those last two games.
agreed, yeah, I do. I know I was kind of team more he chokes, but at least in this series, I think it was more a consequence of A, Embiid also not showing up, B,
Yeah.
kind of the lack of adjustments in their game plan. Come those last two games, it just nothing was working, and they weren't really willing to adjust. And then Harden, I think, to some extent, gets tired at this point, and he's just not capable of dropping more than he needs his off games to kind of have his good games.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It definitely gets tired. And like I just had to pull up his playoff stats real quick too. And it's definitely evident that he's older and doing less at this point in his career. Like the past 3 years, his playoff averages have been 20 points per game, 19, 20. It's like not very spectacular, especially considering, this is a guy who averages almost, 30 in the regular season. But that's also kind of in the twilight of his career. Those seasons are like Brooklyn, Philly, Philly. But when he was with Houston, it was like in the playoffs, it was always, 30 points per game. So I don't know. I think he's still awesome.
In that Golden State series, he was dropping 40 every game, win or loss.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's beat up on a little unnecessarily.
Yeah, so there it is. Let us know in the comments if you think he's a generational choker or not.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we'll see Zach Lowe in the comments just going off on him.
my opinion, kind of not. Very
Yeah,
odd. Anyway, I guess we can talk about if I don't know if we should even get too into it. Just that I don't know. I think Maxi's an awesome player. I think if Harden leaves, they have great potential, but ultimately, like I don't see that getting them over the hump. I think Embiid also has to kind of take some onus in their shortcomings, and
yeah, yeah. I feel like that's ultimately what it comes down to. Is like this is always going to be Embiid's team, and he'll essentially go as far as he can take them. Because even if you look like the Bucks and Giannis, like the Bucks have a good team, but when the Bucks made their finals run, it was because Giannis was like so outstanding that nobody could stop him. And like Middleton and Holiday are great players, but they're not these like co-superstar guys. It's like you really just need the guys around Embiid to be good enough. So it doesn't have to be Harden. It can really be any other all-star caliber player. And it's going to come down to whether or not Embiid can be an unstoppable force in the playoffs.
yeah, the thing with Embiid is like I feel like there's been a lot of situations where a lot of the blame has been able to get to a degree rightfully diverted away from him. Obviously, the Simmons thing, like it's hard not to look at that and say, okay, Simmons deserves all the blame for that because of
Hmm.
major drop off after the fact. But Embiid wasn't having great games in that infamous game 7 against the Hawks. I don't think he showed up either, and then
No.
was pretty quick to throw Ben Simmons under the bus. And again, against the Celtics, he didn't show up, and he kind of has this pattern of going pretty all out in the regular season, missing a lot of games with injuries, but going pretty hard when he's not injured. This year, especially, going all out for that MVP. And then the version of him we see in the playoffs seems a bit tired, needs some games off, um, and not able to be like a constant dominant force like we see out of Giannis, for example.
Yeah, the best players always elevate themselves in the playoffs. And like usually you'll look at their regular season stats and be like, these are incredible. And then you look at their playoff stats and you're like, oh my God, they're even better. Like you see like Jimmy Butler. Like Jimmy Butler's playoff stats are always so much better than his regular season stats. And it's pretty much the opposite for Embiid. Like last season, he was averaging 33 points per game, 10 rebounds, 4 assists in the regular season. And he literally dropped off from 33 points per game to 24 points per game, 10 rebounds, 3 assists. So like the jump from 33 points per game to 24 is huge for a team, especially when you're the primary scorer. It's like if you can't maintain 30 points per game in the playoffs, like they can only go so far.
And yeah, his assist to turnover ratio is pretty horrendous too.
Field goal percent is also like a lot lower than I expected because like usually big men are super efficient from the floor. Yeah, in the playoffs for Embiid this year, he shot 43%, which is like worse than a lot of guards. Like that is so inefficient.
Yeah,
Like Tyrese Maxey shoots better from three than Embiid just shot straight up in the playoffs.
that's a fun fact. Yeah, but it's because it seems like he would get tired and then he would pull bad shots and a lot of deep mid ranges, some threes.
Yeah, and I think he gets flustered. Like he's like one of the kings of bad body language in the league. It's very obvious when Joel Embiid is having a bad day. Like him and Luka, nobody shows it more than them.
For sure, yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. I think it just goes to say that maybe his days of getting the blame diverted elsewhere are numbered.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's officially on him. And if they move Harden, there's really no one else to point the finger to because there's no co-star. It used to be like Embiid and Simmons co-star, Harden Embiid co-star. And then once Harden's done, it's like everything's going to be on Embiid's back, and it's going to be up to him to show up or not. So kind of in conclusion, like the Sixers are a mess. I don't really know what's going to happen, but they're kind of in a tough spot. And their outlook does not look amazing, but they could still be great as long as Embiid, keeps improving, can hopefully, step up in the playoffs. And maybe we'll see that now that he has his MVP, and maybe rest a little bit more in the regular season, and then come playoffs, we see him take that big step that we're waiting on.
Agreed. Yeah, and I guess my closing thoughts are also that I'm a huge believer in Maxi's potential, and I would love to see a team where he's the clear second option because he does everything super efficiently, super well, and he does it with a smile on his face, despite I think probably not always being as happy as he looks with the team he's on. Um, and also like Tobias Harris, I know he gets shit on a lot, but like he's a solid role player, someone I would still want as like
Totally.
they're
I
on
think I think it's just like a contract thing for him. It's just like it feels a little too expensive now, but he's still an awesome player to have.
for sure. Yeah, he's huge. He shoots well, and yeah, I think the Sixers kind of deserve a lot of the shit they've gotten because on paper that's like a really good team with good role players, an MVP, a former MVP, and they're not able to get over the hump and even make it to the conference finals. So
Yeah, yeah, and like the process is over. They went through years of tanking and torturing their fans to get to this point. And it's still just like continued to be messy. So we'll see if they can turn around, but it's definitely going to be a bit of a mystery going into this season.
for sure, yeah. Do we talk about their sister team in the West, who's also equally mess? Well, maybe not equally messy. Their situation is a bit different.
Yeah, yeah, we can do Clippers. Just want to be a little bit quicker. I think I don't know if there's as much drama to dive into as there is with Harden, but I think they're in a super interesting spot right now because you can see them kind of approaching the fork in the road as they debate whether or not they should extend PG and Kawhi as they kind of approach the twilights of their career. They still have several good years left in them, but they're definitely getting older and more injury prone. It's kind of an interesting team to look at because a lot of people still expect them to be a really good team. But obviously we didn't have them very high in our Western Conference rankings. So I don't know. I think there's a lot to discuss here and kind of like figure out what the best route forward for them is.
Yeah, and it seems the Clippers are unwilling to give them the supermax. That's kind of
Yeah,
off the table, and rightfully so. I think
absolutely. Oh my God.
that's,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, that's the right
they're in
move.
their late 30s by the time that expires. And yeah, Sean and I, when we did our top 10 forwards, Paul George and Kawhi, I think we're outside of my top 10. I think Kawhi might have cracked it.
Hmm.
Sean still felt strongly that Paul George was one of the best forwards in the league. And I don't know. I kind of want to hear your takes on what you think Kawhi's future looks like, if he has any future, if that's even something we're able to predict at this point. And same with Paul George, if he still has that ability to be kind of the first option on this team. And do Clippers fans have any reason to be hopeful for their future?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing because when they first assembled this team, like it was pretty clear that not only did they have two of like the top 10 small forwards in the league, but like maybe two of like the top five. Like they're both in their peaks. Kawhi had just carried the Raptors to a championship. Both were perennial all-star players. Their health was still pretty good, although Kawhi, had a couple of knee problems leading up to the Raptors run. But it feels like they're sliding, and usually something that I notice is like once you really start to like see a player decline, and you see in their stats, it's pretty rare for them to kind of rebound back up, especially if they're getting older and approaching the end of their career. So if I'm the Clippers, and I think this is what they're worried about because they're not willing to extend these guys, I think they're worried that things are really going to get worse from here, and they're going to continue to struggle to get on the floor. And even when they are on the floor, are they good enough to be a top team? Like if Kawhi and Paul George are like fully healthy next season, are they fifth or sixth in the West? Like the problem is that like if they're fully healthy, I still just don't think they're good enough in this Western Conference. Just now that these guys are a little bit older, and some of the younger guys have surpassed them. So it kind of brings up an interesting question: is like, do you even run it back, or do you just try to sell these guys? I don't think it's out of the question that they should consider selling them.
No, I think it's even something that I would lean towards because like a healthy Kawhi at this point, I kind of talked about it with Sean, is like almost inconceivable to me.
Hmm.
We see like last year we saw some great games out of him, but I think it was just beyond evident that the workload of the NBA is just not something that he can handle at this point.
Yeah,
So and Paul George, I think it's more likely that we can see like another great season out of him, but like at his peak, I think he's still not in that like superstar. He is a superstar in a lot of respects, and but it seems like he's not someone that can compete with the very best, and like he tends to slump when he's like the true first option.
yeah, for sure. There's a little bit older, so they don't really have the. I just don't think they have the. I don't know, like the drive like some of the young players do. Like guys like Jason Tatum, like he's got no problems playing 40 minutes of outstanding basketball in the playoffs every single night. But I think at this point, like that's just a little bit harder for somebody like Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. And then there's also just big injury risks on top of it. And then yeah, their contracts are expiring. They're getting older. Like Paul George is maybe 34 this year. And then if you extend him, you're gonna be extending for like years like 35, 36, 37. And it's like 37-year-old Paul George and like 36-year-old Kawhi Leonard leading you to a championship. I don't think so, but I think they're still very valuable assets for other teams who want to add these guys, give them a lighter workload, kind of have them be like a pseudo second or third option on their team. Like I think they can still like contribute to winning basketball, but I think like building a team around them in this stacked Western Conference is a big ask.
For sure, yeah. And it's crazy to think about only 2 years ago how it seems like they were potentially the favorites to come out of the West.
Yeah, I think everyone had like picked them to be the top seed, me included, which like felt so dumb in hindsight when they were not even close to that.
Yeah,
That was like such an all-time bad take by the entire basketball community. But I guess the silver lining is literally everybody thought they're gonna be the first seed, so we at least all felt dumb together.
I forget if it was for this season. I'm pretty sure it was for this season that Lowe thought it was going to be Bucks Clippers. Maybe a bit of a
Yeah,
double on his previous year's take that the Clippers were gonna.
it could have been. I think he's still doubling down. Like I think he still expects the Clippers to be very good this season. Um, from what I heard on his last pod, I don't think he's expecting them to win the finals, but I think he still expects them to be like a 4 or 5 seed. So does Vegas. I do not.
Yeah, I remember hearing when Kawhi got his surgery and then he came back as kind of like half of how good he really is. Somebody said like, oh, he's kind of on a longer timeline. This is all part of his plan. Like it's a
Hmm.
2 year recovery process, and that's kind of always remained in the back of my mind. But it just seems way too optimistic to think that he's going to be able to even get to like 80% of what he once was, and like the knee
Yeah,
too.
yeah, and there's still the risk of other injuries too, and because it's not like it's just like one thing with him. It feels like it feels like his all of his lower extremities are just like having issues.
Poor guy, and
Yeah, and it does suck because he's one of the best players ever. Like he's literally so good.
he has the
Like
it factor. Yeah, he's the type of guy that can get you to the finals and win you the championship, as we've seen.
yeah, yeah, because he's such a two-way player at what is still, I think, the most valuable position. When you have those two-way forwards, it makes a ton of sense on paper. There's kind of like an older version of the setup the Celtics have right now, but there's like health is such a big issue for them,
Yeah,
which is sad. It's like such a shitty thing to be like. I think they're awesome. I just don't think they're gonna play.
and he's clutch, and he like you said, the
So
two.
clutch, so clutch, and yeah, and what also sucks too is like looking at. I guess it's more so sucks for the Clippers front office, but they're both going into the last year of their contract. So even if they did decide to like pivot and trade them, you're probably not getting that much for them. So I guess like the only other option would be like you re-sign them. But then if you do re-sign them, you probably can't trade them for another season. So you can't really trade them until like yeah, they're like Paul George 36, Kawhi 35. So it's logistically very messy right now. And it also just hurts that the Clippers gave up Shea Gilgeous-Alexander in order to get Paul George. So I feel like it's gonna be tough for them to settle for a small Paul George deal, knowing what they gave up for him.
Yeah, yeah, that is that's painful in hindsight, but I think you take that trade. Obviously, if you knew that what SJ would become, like you don't take the trade. But at the time,
Mhm.
it made sense. Looking back, it still makes sense knowing what they knew.
Yeah, totally. Because essentially they're getting both. They had to make the Paul George trade in order to get Kawhi Leonard. So it's kind of like they traded SGA and all those picks for both of those players. So that's kind of how they justified it. It makes sense. I would still make that deal today. Um, you know, assuming we can't really forecast how this all ends up. Yeah, it sucks. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny that yeah we've been talking at length about both of these situations, and yeah, the conclusion is I don't know.
Yeah, it's like fuck.
Clippers
Especially the
fans, at
yeah,
least to me, the Clippers organization is more competent. Like I actually like Ty Lue a lot as a coach.
me
Seems like
too.
they have a
Yeah.
good coaching staff. Considering what last season was for the Clippers, it's still surprising that they pulled off 44 wins last season.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah. I kind of looking at the roster, I'm kind of talking myself into just running it back one more time, just because like you invested so much money and so many assets into creating this team, and the structure of it is still good. Like if things can just work out and Paul George and Kawhi are healthy, then like you still have a chance to be good in the playoffs, and like you've got quality players around them. Like Terrence Mann is still really good. They traded for oh no, they didn't trade for. I think they just signed him. Kenyon Martin, but like he's awesome.
I think
So
they
we'll kind of yeah, okay, yeah, yeah, you're right. So like, but he's an excellent addition. I like that they added Plumlee. I think Plumlee's pretty good. They still have Westbrook, who's like a good energy guy, also on like a really cheap contract. I thought he was going to get a little bit more this offseason. So like, funny enough, I think that was a good bargain for them. So it's like I think the team still has potential. And will still probably be good in the regular season. So maybe you kind of just accept that, and you're like, hey, we'll
Yeah,
just be like a decent regular season team. We'll be fun. We'll still like sell tickets, make a lot of money this season, even if being a championship caliber team is probably out of our reach. But I think that's probably the move because I don't think you can really get any assets for Paul George and Kawhi on expirings right now.
and yeah, when you're the team from Los Angeles, not the team, a team from Los Angeles, they're
An
still
A team.
little brothers, but
Yeah.
they always have that appeal of kind of quick rebuilds, and people will just want to sign there to live in Los Angeles. And like you said, yeah, like I don't know, they have enough to stay afloat, and if they can manage Kawhi's injuries to some extent, that just seems hopeless. But at least Paul George, I think they can kind of manage his workload, and we can see a pretty good version out of him. And
Yeah.
there's a world where they kind of can make playoffs, maybe have a good series, and we kind
Mhm.
of get to see some last great performances by three generational talents in Westbrook, Paul George, and my favorite Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, and I think it's possible that you would get more out of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George 2 years from now than you could right now because they're on expirings. So maybe that's the move. Maybe it's like you kind of run this team for the next year or two, see if you can get lucky and everything breaks right. Like what's worst case scenario? Like worst case scenario was last year. So it's like you're kind of already there anyway. So I say like run it for 2 more years, re-sign Kawhi and PG after the season, hopefully to something like 3 years, 120 million each. So it's like 40 million a year. I feel like that's fair. It's around the max. It's not a super max or anything like that. The years, make a little more sense for the team. So you're not paying Paul George until he's 39. And then as you run that for 2 more years, once they hit year two of that contract, you trade them. I'm sure another team would be more than willing to, give up a decent haul to add Paul George or Kawhi with like 2 years left on their deal.
Yeah,
And at
agreed.
that point, they'd only be like 35-ish. So I think that still works.
Man, Kawhi kind of like had me convinced for a moment last season with how slow he started off, and then by the end of the season, he like looked maybe at like 80%
Yeah.
of his former self.
Yeah, no, he looked really good towards the end of last season and even like showed some flashes before ultimately getting hurt again. So it's like it's hard for me not to hold out hope. And like because I do have that little bit of hope, I think that's probably why you do just give this like 2 more years just to see. But then there also is the risk that like on you could just lose them for nothing this off season. I think that's also possible. I think Kawhi at least likes being in LA because I think he's from there,
Yeah.
or at least has like family there. So I think there's a good chance Kawhi would resign, just like still be in LA. Um, Paul George, I'm not so sure about actually. I think I'm sure he loves LA, so he might stick around. That's kind of the benefit of being in a big market. You're able to take these kind of risks, whereas like a small market team could never let players like this hit free agency. They would just give them whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
But you do kind of have that luxury as the Clippers, so I think you can risk that.
I hope to see a world where I would love for the Clippers for things to break right for them. I'm rooting against the Sixers in every aspect, and I'm kind of rooting for the Clippers just because, like, even before the Paul George Kawhi era, they've always played above their. Um,
Totally. Yeah, and I like the Clippers a lot. They feel like a team that they did it right. Like they really like established a team of like really awesome veterans, brought in a great veteran coach in Ty Lue, made what felt like a really smart move trading for PG and bringing on Kawhi, and kind of like assembling this like next new age team. Whereas like there's kind of like the 3-point shooting era in Houston that we talked about earlier. And then it felt like the next meta was to try to get like two really big forwards, switch everything, shoot threes, play awesome defense. And the Clippers felt like they put together the perfect team to do that with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. And then they just got unlucky, and it kind of sucks because I feel like it was an awesome team, and they did a really good job assembling it.
and also to their credit, maybe the first franchise to kind of reel in Westbrook and have him play
Yeah, like it's just a well-run team. Yeah,
like we've talked about how he came off the bench, how he was willing to crash the boards and kind of actually end up being a great fit, which in my mind seemed impossible after his tenure with the Lakers. I was like, this
Oh
guy
yeah,
can never contribute to winning again.
everybody was out. Like the narrative before he joined the Clippers, people were talking like this could be his last season because what championship team would even consider adding Westbrook because he's such a negative with his shooting percentage and his turnovers and he's a ball hog and he just jacks up shots all throughout the game. Like, how can you have him? And the Clippers like legitimately made him an asset, which is incredible because they might have been one of the only competitive teams actually capable of doing that.
I think I was saying that I didn't see him re-signing with any team, that no team would
I think I said that too.
want him.
I was like, maybe you sign him if you want to be like the tank general for your team, and you're just like this awful team, but you just have Westbrook who'd be fun. But they look really good for the Clippers, which is like super admirable, and I feel good for Westbrook also because it felt like all of sports media was really starting to pile up on Westbrook, and like that's just brutal, and it must have taken a mental toll, but I think he's got a lot of mental fortitude, and it seemed like he was able to get through that no problem, which I tip my hat to him for that. So no, the whole team is like a feel good story. So I'd like for them to, I don't know, get some kind of closure.
For sure. Yeah. And a last hoorah for guys like Kawhi and Paul George would also be
Yeah, they deserve it.
heartwarming. Well, anyway, we've been talking for probably an hour and a half. And in conclusion, I don't know, who knows? We will
Yeah,
see.
yeah, totally. In conclusion, these teams could kind of go anywhere, this off season and like up until the trade deadline. We'll kind of see. It's like I don't know, they're complex situations. It's tough to figure out exactly what direction they should go in, which is why they're both unresolved. Like they're paying these front offices millions, and they also don't know what to do. So it's a tricky situation. I'm interested to see how it unfolds for both these teams.
Yeah, and when Harden gets inevitably traded for Zach Levine, I think we will, especially you, look like a genius. So,
Yeah, I will pop champagne the second that happens.
well, another fantastic episode of the Harold McBasketball podcast comes to a close. Thank you to all our subscribers, to all of our listeners. Um, we're on the Apple Podcast app if you get tired of looking at our handsome faces. And yeah, any closing thoughts, Harry? You want to send us off?
No, just thank you all for tuning in again. You guys have really been crushing it with the views recently. We hope to keep that up. The exponential growth has been absolutely phenomenal. So just make sure to like, subscribe, share, listen to the podcast on repeat, and we will talk to you next week.